If you're planning to spend the day...
Portland, North America's official 12-in-a-row radio station.
Under the zoning ordinance, we don't have to have a public hearing, right? But if it's under the subdivision here, then, but yeah, we're not obligated to. If this public purpose is to be we can vote to take something, to wait to do
until we can get started.
That's good.
Cancel everything I said. Cancel everything I said. Okay, so your suggestion on this one is let's go through the Conservation Commission on this change. Anyway, there's a number of reasons why this thing may get tabled.
Yeah. We can vote to table it, can't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
somebody makes the motion, sure.
Thank you. Okay. So we'll wait for you to sit down and then we will
seeking to do.
Yeah. Steve and I talked about it
Very
before.
short. Thank you for waiting.
Planning board will come to order. Actually, everyone is so quiet in the audience, it really isn't necessary to call you to order, and I thank you for bearing with us. We're running 5 minutes behind schedule. We had a great deal of housekeeping to do. Welcome to the August meeting of the Planning Board. Do I hear a motion to waive the reading of the minutes of the July 18th meeting?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Are there any additions or corrections to the excellent minutes of the July 18th meeting?
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Is there a second? Good. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Again? Okay, motion is carried. On correspondence, it was a light month. On July 24th, we have a letter that was sent to Jerry Daigle and passed on to us from George Marcus concerning a right-of-way in the Broad Cove subdivision. I had a very kind letter from the Redeemer Lutheran Church, which was an invitation to their groundbreaking ceremonies last Saturday, which I was unable to attend. We had a flyer from PAX regarding transportation in the greater Portland area. And last of all, a letter dated August 4th from Michael McGovern regarding engineering services in Cape Elizabeth. On old business, the first item is the Meadowview subdivision. I have a conflict of interest on that subdivision, so Ivan Most has agreed to take over that portion of the meeting and appoint Steve Etzel a voting member this evening. Thank you, Ivan. I will return.
Thank you, Marion. First thing I'd like to do is appoint Steve Etzel, a voting member for this evening. On the question of this, before we get into the Meadowview situation, I'd like to clarify a few items of correspondence, some of which were sent to the planning board, some of which were not. You should be aware that at the last meeting, if you review the minutes, it'll show that I was requested to write a letter to Bob Hunter concerning the way the drainage situation was reviewed on the Meadowview parcel. I did write that letter. It should have been included in your packets. You should know that I received a response from Bob dated August 1st. I'm not going to read the entire length of it because it is quite lengthy. It does review the fairly detailed correspondence which was in our packets on the issues that were raised that evening. He referenced 4 letters concerning the issues that we talked about, one on May 11th, one on June 12th, one on June 16th, and one on July 6th. I feel satisfied that Bob has answered our questions on this, and I certainly will make this letter available through our secretary to the board. And if you have any additional questions on engineering services, you could either direct them to me or to Marion. It has prompted also you should know, it has prompted a response from the town manager, Michael McGovern, concerning our ability or our correspondence directly with staff, especially hired consultants. And he indicated that most of this should have gone through his office. I accept the slap on the hand, so to speak, from Mike on this issue. And I suggested to him that it might be very helpful if the planning board in its next or one of its next workshops had a session with Mike and where we could discuss how professional staff is used by the planning board and how the arrangements are made through the town so that we have a little better idea of how these contracts are administered. So Mike will be coming to one of our next planning boards to discuss the issue, and this doesn't really just concern Bob Hunter, it concerns any of the staff that we bring on as consultants. We are spending town funds, and Mike is responsible fiscally to the town, so I think it's an important issue. Are there any questions on this point? Okay, I just wanted you to be up to date on it, and at this point I'd like to ask if anybody is here from the Meadowview subdivision plan.
Members of the Planning Board, I'm Wayne Johnson, one of the owners and partners in KW Associates proposing Meadowview subdivision. And I would like to present our consultants to answer any questions, but before that, perhaps review a couple of issues which have arisen, and to also commend a couple of, let's say, servants of the town of Cape Elizabeth. The Conservation Commission has written a letter, Sally Tinsman, with regard to our meeting there, encapsulating that, and also there's a copy of an excellent letter and review by the counsel for the town, Tom Leahy, and Dave Fisher, Drummond & Drummond, and I have reviewed that, and I would like to share with you a couple of thoughts, because both Dave and I have served on boards and commissions in our hometowns, as you do, and perhaps there are some public policy issues that, in discussing our subdivision, might help guide the public body and developers in the future. Many of the suggestions really don't present a problem, and I thought if there were questions that the board had on that, we could deal with them. The warranties and the covenants and the book and page, most of the issues are well taken, and we're dealing with them. There are a couple which have come to mind, and in trying to design a document in order to grant the land to the public body, Cape Elizabeth, we had some excellent help from Dr. Rand, who sent us copies of the Hubstone and Canterbury easements, and Tom Leahy sent a copy of the Stonegate fee simple designation. But I think what we found, and it's something that perhaps could assist you and other developers with guidance, is that perhaps there's a need for consistency in the language of, and some guidance for management of this greenbelt. I know the puzzle is just coming together, but perhaps looking down the road to the future when it's connected, the planning board could assist future boards in the town to develop a policy of guidance as to what goes on in a greenbelt, what kinds of activities are allowed and what are prohibited. Ours that we drafted, I find, is a little more restrictive than perhaps Tom Leahy and some others have suggested. In our document, as we found in Canterbury, we preferred to prohibit all motorized vehicles. I think it was our feeling that it was a conservation area and that perhaps passive recreational activities such as cross-country skiing, jogging, or walking would be appropriate, but that we're not really sure whether a motorized vehicle would permit ATVs. There was a question on maintenance by the public body, whether maintenance vehicles should be able to go out there. I guess I would be more comfortable if I knew who was going to maintain it and there were some guidelines for the public body and what should go there, which doesn't exist now, and I'd be more comfortable with the prohibition of all motorized vehicles. But in our research and review of the documents, there are differences. Stonegate, for example, permits emergency vehicles. Canterbury appears to prohibit pretty much everything. I happen to like that. Hobstone, the question is open. I think that might be an issue of public policy to be addressed, and perhaps in drawing this document up, we might have something that could be used as a model for the future. So it's appropriate that we discuss it and the public discussion is held on that. That's the one issue that I can see. The others, with regards to drainage easements, we've had some comments from the Public Works Department with regard to including some language there that really appears to be reasonable. I guess for some of the attorneys or people on the board, there's a question that Tom raised, and an excellent one, perhaps in protecting the town, not wanting the town to accept the liability that we had suggested in our document. And in review of the documents, at least we found in the fee simple designation, we feel the town already has that liability. And the easement of Canterbury, there are some what we felt language developed in there that would provide that the town, in accepting the easement, does accept some liability too. It's a question that's left open, and I would think that a private homeowner having an easement across the back of the land would want to be protected from any kind of legal action or litigation should the public injure themselves on it, or in the possibility that perhaps this place gets messed up and cleaned up, and we felt some rather restrictive language there would provide the homeowner opportunity to say, hey, this area is public and it ought to be cleaned up. Some things ought to be done. Somebody could bring it to the attention of the public body. So these are some thoughts that went into it, and I wanted to share them with you, and then opening up to questions on your behalf, and I think probably the questions with regard to the easement may raise some issues.
Yeah, I think we'll want to probably start there. I think your comments are well noted, and it may make some sense in review of what Tom has written here to maybe this would be something as our Greenbelt starts to develop to be the subject of a workshop to develop maybe not an ordinance, but maybe some special model warranty deeds for future developers to utilize that would give some guidance in these areas. So I appreciate your comments, because it is something that we're going to be needing to look at more and more. Steve, maybe you could make some notes on that. This might be something that we could carry on later on. On the easement, it's my understanding that there have been some changes to that easement since the original application. And if that's the case, could you indicate to us what those changes are and why they occurred?
Yes, I can. And I'd ask Lisa Cowan to assist me with perhaps some of the artwork. When we had, I can't remember, it's when we met with the staff or when we decided on the piece of land, we had noted that Canterbury had, and I didn't even have a copy of the easement at the time, had donated something, a piece of land along the back, and the Greenbelt went there, and I have to confess we didn't know where it was coming from or where it was going. We elected, purely arbitrarily, in reading the code, we read the code probably against our own interest. We thought we should donate a minimum of 10%. The code says a minimum up to 10%. So we carved off a line which included both good land and wetland, and went right straight across, probably for no other better reason than it abutted, and we didn't have any other information. Following the meeting with the Conservation Commission, which I found very helpful, we found they indeed did have a plan for the greenbelt. And I can't remember who made the comment, but the comment was made to us, why did you do that? I gave the same explanation. And then, as the meeting evolved, we found that the desire would be to, rather to include land along this border to perhaps someday tie in with the easement from Hobstone, which exists down in this area, and try to at least line those up so that there could be, hopefully in the future, a greenbelt up through here. And since Canterbury had already provided the space up there, and I hope I'm reading people right, it seems superfluous for us to give any additional space down here, but rather the 10% should come down this line. And so what we did is try to develop that concept based on our meeting with the Conservation Commission, and hence we've this would be the change in plan. And we don't have any design with Sally Tinsman's letter, but I believe we've captured correctly the concerns and comments of the Conservation Commission.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if I could ask some questions and make some comments in regards to this. And in fact, I might even like to go up to the board if I can, because I brought some artwork too. Dr. Peter Rand, who I am closely related to, had some concerns about this particular easement. One concern, as you have already touched on, is the process of getting through ultimately the Conservation Commission first, then the Planning Board, and then finally to the Town Council, and that does need, I think, a workshop on this would be excellent. But from this coloring, you can see that the yellow is wetland vegetation and the orange is wetland soils. There is some concern that perhaps the conservation easement should be really more hammered out with the entire Conservation Commission, and because they are our advisors in effect to the Planning Board. And there is a question as to whether it's passable. They need to walk over the site and see it so that they can get assurance of what they don't like to get their feet wet when they receive easements.
Or when they walk the site.
Right. So that is one of the stipulations that they do like to put into reception of a conservation easement. So I think it would be at least my suggestion that perhaps this should be negotiated more. It is a negotiation process with the Conservation Commission first before it gets to the Planning Board, and I just don't know, but I thought it might be illuminating to have you see what is this territory in color.
I would echo those comments, and talking to Dr. Rand, again, that's an excellent point. Guidance as to developer as to when to go to the Conservation Commission, what role they play in negotiations. Point well taken. Perhaps the developer should come back and firm up these plans, and we're kind of feeling our way through the process. I wouldn't have any objection to that if
we generally look to the Conservation Commission for advice and counsel in the area of easements like this. They have the expertise, or they can draw on the expertise to tell us, what direction they should take. If I remember correctly, and I didn't stay for the entire sidewalk, in the sidewalk, we never got into that back area. Is that true?
That's true.
So we really never got a chance to look at either option, the straight back one or the one that's longer now. Okay. Then if I can bring this to a bit of a summary point, then we have made a change in tack, so to speak, on the easement. This latest one has not gone through the conservation easement review process, and it comes to us at this point. I wonder if we could, if it is a good idea at this point in time to review the remaining elements of this plan and anything that may still be outstanding, and then we'll have to come to a decision as to how we want to treat this issue of this easement. Is the board interested in that approach? Okay. Then maybe we can move at this point in time to the question of the amount to be set for the letter of credit. Have you seen the documents on that?
Are you addressing me?
Yes.
Yes, I have a copy of Robert Hunter's letter from TY and International to Stephen Butler of August 10th.
Where he's increased the amount for contingencies?
That's right.
Over what? Do you have any problems with that?
I find that's not unusual, and that's fine.
Okay, so have we received a revised letter of credit, I guess is the question.
The town hasn't received the letter of credit itself, and that's something that, needs to be done by the applicant. But right now, the board's duty is to set the amount and put any other conditions it wants to place on the condition, on the letter of credit, and then the next step would be for that letter of credit with the amount to be filled in, then to be submitted to the town attorney and town engineer for review. Town attorney and town manager for review and approval.
Is there anything wrong with us doing that at this point in time?
No.
Okay, well, if the board would bear with me on that, that might be a piece of business we could get out of the way this evening. And we do have a motion that has been prepared for us, and if I could hear that motion from one of the members, we could maybe move on that issue anyways.
I'd be glad to read the first motion, which is, be it ordered that the planning board sets the irrevocable letter of credit amount for the proposed Meadowview subdivision at $107,000 in accordance with section 16-2-4B of the subdivision ordinance, the town engineer's letter of August 10th, 1989, and the facts presented.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion on this letter of credit issue? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The letter of credit amount is set, and we would look for that documentation.
Okay.
Now, let's get to the question of completeness, because that really gets to the point of whether we can go further with the final plan review at this point in time. You have a summary from our planner of the final plan submission checklist, and there are some items here that are noted as partial, and we do have the question of the easement. Steve, could you take us through this and see if we're clear on all items?
I think just running down the items that are partial or left blank, I think 2C, the corner monument markers, I think that's something that really can't be finalized until the actual construction work's done. That's why I put final down. I don't think that's a big issue there. I haven't checked myself to see if there's some temporary markers out there yet. I guess I'd ask the applicant, and we could follow up with that.
We had ordered the surveyor to get it done by this meeting. I can't say that I've checked it, though. But they are extremely close to what has been done before, so there has been very little change since the preliminary plan, so.
Okay.
The old ones are probably still out there if the new ones aren't.
Okay. Lot line data, I think, is satisfactory, so that the question mark can be switched to an okay. Then going down to the other items, I think most of the rest of them deal with the either municipal approval, 6C is written evidence of municipal approval of individual septic systems. And I did receive, and you should have received tonight, a memo from Ernie McBain to that effect, stating that everything's fine there. So that would be an okay as of this evening, 6C. So I want to make sure it's on Town of Cape Elizabeth stationery, Ernest McBain off to the side. Okay. The remaining items that are, most of the checklist is either not applicable or just hasn't been complied with yet, and that relates to the fact that the town council last night did not deal with the, did not conditionally accept some of the infrastructure improvements that were to be dedicated to the town, such as streets, sewer lines, and things of this nature. And the reason for that really tied back to the some of the I don't want to say confusion, but to the switch that the applicant made in terms of the conservation easement and the land to be dedicated. It was I felt, and then checking with Acting Chairman Mose, that there was some confusion on the part of the board, or it may not have been completely clear at the last meeting, and therefore the town council did not want to act to conditionally accept all improvements until everything had been taken care of. And that's something then that they would entertain to do once, I would guess, based on the discussion we just had, once the applicant had met with the Conservation Commission, had worked things out, and had submitted revised plans back to the planning board, so everything was all clear. And the town council doesn't want to deal with something more than once if they don't have to. I mean, this is relatively routine and procedural for them. They wanted to make sure that the planning board and Conservation Commission had everything pretty much approved and taken care of. So that's a long-winded explanation for stating that those items are blank because the town council just hasn't given that conditional approval and won't until the pedestrian easement issue has been satisfied to everybody's liking.
So that really, can we summarize it that the pedestrian easement issue is the only issue remaining on this development at this point in time?
In terms of completeness, yes.
In terms of completeness?
Well, that, and then the follow-up with the town council acceptance, yes.
Yeah.
Conditional
Right,
acceptance, yes.
right. So we have an application which is not complete at this point in time, with the exception of that one item. And I guess in the past, we've gone two routes, and one is to table until those items are complete, and the other is to accept conditionally. We've gone through some changes to our ordinances, and we were hoping at this juncture to be doing more of straight acceptances with less conditions. So it's not a preferred route in my mind, anyways, to start conditioning acceptances again. But I'd like to poll the board and see what the board would like to do at this point in time. Are there any thoughts on this issue?
I tend to agree, as a matter of principle, on the conditional versus non-conditional, although every situation, I think, you have to take in on its own merits. I think it's clear that a condition shouldn't substitute for a denial. I think if a condition is a minor item that we know is going to be taken care of, then I have less problem with, and I know the courts of the state do also, with that kind of condition than one where you'd have to deny it if it weren't for the condition. So I think that's a rough guideline that the courts use in licensing, and I feel comfortable with that. And I think this one, although they're not serious, they're things that if we didn't have, I think we probably would have to deny it. I'm not saying that we would. I've got another reason, though, why I think maybe tabling is the appropriate step, and that is that we received 2 letters on this buffering issue, and I don't know whether you people have gotten these letters.
We have copies.
One of which states that this one is from Michael Drynan. It says, "I was surprised to find, while watching last night's proceedings on TV, that Ken Tubbs said he had spoken to me regarding this matter. I never met any representative of KW Associates, nor have ever discussed the project with them, and it's wrong, etc." Now, I'm sure that's a misunderstanding. On the other hand, we now have 2 new letters on buffering. I noticed you've added some things here, and the best way to handle this would be, if it were going to be tabled anyway, is to tell you people to get together with the senders of these letters, and hopefully you and they will reach some agreement. And that way we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone and not have to mediate tonight whether somebody was or was not spoken to, or whether somebody is happy or unhappy. It seems like the kind of thing that ought to be worked out. If it's not, then I suspect we'll hear back from the people who have given us their views, and we'll have to deal with it next time, but at least we won't have to deal with who said what to whom. So I guess for that reason, I'd want to table it.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this issue?
I would concur with Mr. Boxer and what Ivan has said, that we should probably table this until we can get things firmer.
And I think the issue of process also is important here. I think the Conservation Commission has to be involved. I think the Conservation Commission's review is extremely important, and then the Town Council has to be apprised of it also. So, do I hear a motion on this issue?
All right. Let me just explore what the motion would be.
Okay.
I think the motion would be that we table this matter to our next meeting. That latter part doesn't have to be part of it, but with the applicant, in order to give the applicant an opportunity to reach agreement with the Conservation Commission on the terms of a proposed easement, and to reach agreement with abutters on appropriate buffering. And if we get those items, one or both, then we have very little to do. Well, we have more to do if we have one than both handled. I'm just kind of exploring what we're talking about doing before
I think it's well to state in the motion what is unresolved, and that would cover us.
Yeah, that's really
by
what I wanted to talk
mentioning
about. Whether we
those
want to,
two.
do we want to table it to the next meeting, or just want to plain table it until that happens?
Just my suggestion would be that we table it. I think if you start giving tabling plus reasons, especially on the buffering issue, I don't think we have a right to give abutters veto power over a development. And when you say you're not encouraging, but you're instructing the developer to reach agreement, what happens if they don't reach agreement?
If I said that, then what I meant was telling the developer that they should talk with the people who have written these letters and hopefully report back that there isn't an issue between all of them. Because I think if we have to take it up if there is an agreement. I mean, there's no way around it. Somebody said my position was represented as such, and it's not true. It seems to me that's what the board's for, to decide before we give final approval what the buffering is. So obviously no one has veto power, but what I am suggesting is that they try and reach agreement.
Agreement and clarification, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. I can go with that.
Mr. Chairman, just procedurally, just to clarify things, make sure we're all where we want to be. I think the motion, the primary motion would be dealing with the issue of completeness. And from what I'm hearing, I think that the basic motion then would be similar to what's in 2A, and the suggested motions, which would be that you're deeming the application for the final plan application at this point to be incomplete.
Right.
Then in addition, the comments that were made by Mr. Boxer, comment suggestions would also then pertain, but I think the motion should be led by the completeness issue and then maybe followed up by some other comments.
Well, if Ivan doesn't feel comfortable with the other comments, certainly the applicant now knows what they are, and if it's cleaner and neater to just move that it be deemed incomplete, then we'll table it until such time as the applicant provides the information. Then they're big boys, they know what we want.
I don't want to operate by dictatorial powers here, so believe me, if there's anything that people want different, that's fine. I just don't want to limit it. There may be other things that might come up that we should be taking care of, too. Sure.
I have a question on the easement. I think it's good. I think we've gotten some guidance tonight, which we didn't have previously with regard to the Conservation Commission, and we hope to have that. We have no problem. I have a question on the buffering. We want to be good neighbors, but on the other hand, I'm taken by Mr. Mo's comment that perhaps some neighbors would like to make certain demands, whether or not they were reasonable or unreasonable, to veto the project in any way possible. I'm not saying this is the case. There may or may not be some misunderstandings in what Mr. Tubbs has said, and I don't want to characterize that. We'll review the tapes of the last planning board meeting and make sure that there were no misunderstandings. At least the stenographic notes do not indicate that he mentioned Michael Drinan's name, but we certainly should check that out. I what is the result of the preliminary approval on the buffering plan? We spent quite a bit of time counting trees and addressing that. Is that something that does not apply now at final, and it is not applicable to us? We have to change that? I got the impression that we had satisfied that. It's just a query, a matter of procedure.
Well, my understanding of the ordinance, and it's a little different in this case because you people are back very quickly. Usually we don't have this short a time period, so it seems as though maybe something was approved last week and we want something more on that, but we're in a different process now. We're in final plan approval, and my understanding of the ordinance is, and it's not uncommon, that at that stage additional items are brought up. It's not, otherwise there would be no reason. There'd be no reason to have a second and final plan approval if the preliminary plan approval bound everything in the final plan approval, and it's because it's so close on the heels of the other that it seems like we're dragging up another issue. So I guess my view, until somebody instructs me legally that we're wrong, is that on final plan approval, the criteria in the ordinance govern, and they allow us to look at a lot of the same issues. Typically, we don't because we're satisfied, but this one has generated 2 new letters. So I guess I'm comfortable saying that the best thing that could happen is that people become good neighbors, and if that doesn't work out and you think they're being asking too much and they think you're not willing to do enough, then I guess I would view us as having the right to hear from the parties before we give final plan approval.
Okay, thank you.
Do I hear a motion on this issue of completeness?
I'll make a motion, be it ordered that the application of KW Associates for final plan approval for Meadowview, a proposed 6-lot subdivision located at 379 Mitchell Road, is deemed to be incomplete in accordance with Section 16-2-4 and the facts presented.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. We will basically be looking for these clarifications as soon as possible. If it's possible by our next meeting, that's fine. Not as soon as possible. Thank you. Okay, Marion, at this point in time, we'll turn the meeting back over to our chairperson, Marion Guthrie.
Thank you. Thank you, Ivan. Next on the agenda, Donald Rutherford, 265 Spurwink Avenue, Public Access Waiver, Section 19-4-2B. Is Mr. Rutherford, I see you there, Mr. Rutherford. Please. How are you this evening? Good.
I'm here for approval on an access road waiver on my property. All the material is in the hands of the planning board. There is one other item that I'd like to call to your attention. I am requesting that the board waive the that the access road be constructed in accordance with subdivision standards and allow construction as is indicated on the drawing. The reason I'm asking that is that there are actually 3 driveways that will be using this access road. The first one, of course, is right at the beginning, and that's the reason I make that request.
Thank you. Any other comments, Mr. Rutherford?
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, perhaps, Steve, you could fill us in. We have a memo in our packets, and perhaps you could indicate how far we've come along in this.
Okay. If you remember, this item came up a few months ago. I believe it was February or March of the past year, of the current year. And the applicant has come back and submitted, you know, a relatively new plan, as you can see. And if you remember, just as an overview, there was some discussion about where the homes could be located, and earlier this year, last time Mr. Rutherford was before the board, he was reserving the possibility of 2 different spots on each of the proposed lots where homes could be built. After thinking about it, discussions with myself, and I think after the planning board site visit, came up with the plan you see before you. He's identified 2 building envelopes, areas in which, as he states, area in which house and garage to be constructed for each of the lots. And that's, in terms of the public access waiver provisions, that's important so that we know whether or not the shown public access area or public access roadways actually are going to be able to fulfill their purpose, which is primarily to get emergency vehicles to and from the houses to be constructed. So he's done that. Some of the issues that perhaps are still out there and I think perhaps could be dealt with through some conditions of approval deal with, you see the memo. People have the memo of August 8th, which the 3rd paragraph down kind of talks about 2 of them. One of which is he just dealt with. The applicant has expressly requested a waiver from the subdivision road standards, which I think is appropriate since we're really only talking about at most 3 lots, and one of the lots to be is already has a house on it. Secondly, there's the need to have maintenance of the access ways kind of resolved, and there's also a need to make sure that the owner, the existing or future owners of Lot 1, once they built their house, that they have the ability to use the gravel right-of-way that's the first kind of hammerhead area that would connect Spurwink Ave back to that lot. By that I mean that if you look at where the lot lines are, you can see the Lot 2 actually includes the area which is shown with the right-of-way in the first hammerhead that probably goes back 300, 400 feet or so. So Lot 1 needs to have a legal easement or some sort of allowance to allow the owners of Lot 1 to be able to go over that to get on to Spurwink Avenue. Same thing actually with the lot upon which the house which Mr. Rutherford actually lives in at this point, that also, since they're going to be using part of the public access way, they would also need to make sure that they have the legal right now and in the future to use that way. So I mean, so that's an issue that I did raise. I think that it's something that could be dealt with in terms of making sure that that does happen, making sure that Mr. Rutherford and his attorney provide or develop language which is then submitted to the town attorney for review and approval. That then be recorded with the Registry of Deeds to make sure it does bind, is binding upon present and future owners. I guess the only other issue, well, there were a couple issues that were raised by the town engineer in his letter.
Dated August 10th.
August 10th, and I just received those today, and that's why you got several memos from Bob Hunter this evening, so I apologize for that. There's several comments that he did make, and you may want to explore some of them in detail. I guess the one I focused in on as being a very major, a more major issue than perhaps some of the others, were that he mentioned the fact that there's not a lot of information about the road to be constructed on what in essence would be the driveway leading back to Lot 1, back to the area where the house and garage would be constructed. That it's unclear in terms of what the actual conditions are. You know, the road profile wasn't provided, a cross-section, things of this nature weren't provided, so it's unclear at this point to the town engineer what's needed. Mr. Hunter suggested that information be provided up front before things go much farther, and that's something the board might wish to consider. Again, in the suggested motion, in the alternative, that might be, again, another condition that before any construction could occur, that information would have to be provided to the town engineer to be reviewed and approved by him. So I think those are the major issues that are still outstanding. There's probably lots of others that you may want to raise.
Good, Steve. Thank you very much. Any discussion by members of the planning board? Any questions?
Mr. Rutherford,
Go ahead, Ivan.
I remember on our site walk, Lot 1 was originally going, the house on Lot 1 was going to be originally constructed without going over the wetlands. Isn't that correct? Was the original envelope, or was Lot 1 structured in a way not to have to go through that wetlands?
We had an alternative house site
Yeah.
on Lot 1, which, after the site visit, my feeling was that the board preferred the secondary location.
I remember that.
And the secondary location is one that I prefer myself and is an ideal spot for a home. That's why it was selected.
But I remember that area had some elevation, too. Yeah. Okay, so that is basically what prompted this change.
Yes, it is.
Okay. That brings me up to speed.
Any other comments or questions?
Just a
Okay.
Just a comment
Go
that
ahead, Alice.
in our subdivision ordinance and the definition of a subdivision ordinance, I think it's quite right that we are able to authorize a waiver in that we're talking about 2 lots, and one is being retained by the owner, so that means he's not in a subdivision with that.
Correct. Good point, Alice. Dan, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I had a comment and a question. In the past, on some of these public access waivers, we've been cautious to assure that subsequently, in future years, we don't get hit with a request to further divide some of the lots. I remember we did that with people on the end of Broad Cove Road.
Right.
We've done it in at least one other case, because the town can get put in a difficult position when somebody then comes and says, I have this 5.4 acre lot, and all I want to do is make one other lot on it, and we wind up with 6 houses on one driveway. We have conditioned some of these public access waivers in the past on no further subdivision of these lots. Does that present any problem?
None whatsoever. In fact, if the board wants to require that to be part of the deed and a covenant in that deed, I have no problem with that. My intent is not to develop any further, just to create these 2 lots.
It probably wouldn't be you that we'd be concerned about. It would be someone later on who might think they've got a couple acres that they can sell off and only need us to go over the same driveway and get our approval.
That's a point well taken, and I think if there's a covenant in the deed, that would eliminate any possibility of that. I'm perfectly willing to do that.
Fine.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair?
Sure.
I think we're close to that 5,000 feet being disturbed, and I would want to make sure that we had a very careful review about the amount of area that is going to be, actual square footage that is going to be disturbed, including the sides, and so I just would want to make sure that that is done.
Good. Anything else? Well, then, do I hear a motion? Steve, did you just hear Alice's comment about any disturbance beyond the 5,000 square feet?
I did, and unless the board wants to specifically address that now, I would think that would be something that the code enforcement officer would be keeping a close eye on, if and when the division of land was to occur and the construction was to begin. So, there may be if there's something more that the board wants to put into the approval now, that might not hurt, but I guess I think that's something that, given the level of information that's here now, I would expect the code enforcement officer would indeed look at the plans and monitor closely that situation.
Just a question, Steve. There there are two comments here. One is area for lawn, I guess that's 3,500 square feet. And then area to be filled, which I guess is the driveway. And is that 4,300? Are we viewing this as not requiring a wetlands permit because that falls in two separate lots, or part of two separate lots?
If they were proposing to do the work now, if they're going to commence the work tomorrow, let's say, and they weren't going to divide the property, and all that was to be filled, they'd definitely go over the 5,000 square foot threshold. Given the fact that the current interpretation of the wetlands ordinance, however, is that it's 5,000 square feet per lot. That's the first point. So at this point, we're looking at...
We fixed that in the new ordinance, didn't we?
But we haven't...
Which hasn't been adopted
That's
yet.
still
Hasn't
a
been.
proposed ordinance. It's not- yeah.
We're gonna stay
That's
away.
something that will be changed. The other issue, too, is, and something that, again, has been addressed by the new ordinance, or the proposed ordinance, is that, is the whole question of when the planning board can look at wetlands alteration. And I guess the interpretation now, as I understand it, is that the applicant isn't actually proposing to fill wetlands, so to speak, and that, so at this point, we're really focusing on the public access waiver provisions, and not until they actually go ahead and start construction would that issue come up. And so that if he came close to or exceeded the 5,000 square foot minimum, at that point, the code enforcement officer would then direct Mr. Rutherford or whoever buys these lots back to the planning board.
Well, I guess that's the question, maybe, or a question which Alice's observation raised. Mr. Rutherford, if you got the public access waiver, is it your plan to put in the driveway and fill the area for the lawn, or would you just be selling two lots that would be unfilled, and you're just assuming that that's what the buyers would need to do?
No, it's my intent to do the work and also to retain the lots at present. I have no intention of selling them at present, and it is my intention to do the work.
So you intend to build the driveway to Lot 1?
That is my present intention, yes.
Because if it were left to the future, then we would probably come under a new ordinance which only allows 1,000 square feet to be filled.
Yes.
But I'm not sure that this doesn't come under this ordinance, because it says no ordinance, no wetland area can be filled, drained, ditched, or otherwise altered. And then it says, except for the 5,000 square feet, but it doesn't say per lot.
No, there's a lot of areas where there's some room for interpretation, and this is something where we've gone back and forth. And as of right now, the code enforcement officer and the town attorney's opinion is that as long as they're separate lots, when the construction's about to begin or begins, then that applies to each individual lot. To point out, though, I mean, it's a good issue, because at this point, we're really looking at one lot of land. And if Mr. Rutherford were to do the work without putting in the registry of deeds the fact that he was creating, in effect, 3 lots, then you're right. As soon as he, between the two areas, as soon as he hit 5,000 square feet, he would automatically trigger the wetlands alteration provision. As long as that line gets registered, put into the registry of deeds, and that's one of the, it's incorporated into the suggested motion, the approval motion, then it goes back to 2 lots. And that's one of those areas which I know has kind of irritated some members of the planning board, and that's something that the new wetlands ordinance draft tries to address.
Do we know what kind of wetlands these are?
Not in great detail.
Does it raise the question that I keep forgetting the answer to, as to whether there's a prohibition on the Sebago monkey peat?
As far as we know, there's no Sebago monkey peat. There's none mapped, and it doesn't appear to be.
But have we had a soils map done of this and a vegetative?
No.
So how do we know? Well, I suppose we go by our own.
Yeah. Again, with this situation, it's difficult because in a lot of ways the board's narrowly constrained to look at primarily public access waiver issues. Wetlands obviously are going to come in. How much and how far we go, there's a little tension between.
Well, this is an application for public access waiver. I don't think we want to send Mr. Rutherford away, though, if in fact we see that what he's doing may require a wetlands permit before he can do it. He wants that certainty, and so does the town. I see an issue here that I think maybe at the very least he ought to be alerted to get something in writing from the code enforcement officer, because I guess I don't read the ordinance the same way. This is a little different. This could be one project with 5,000 square feet, and you ought to at least do that. I don't think that the wetlands application is before us.
No.
I guess the other question that I do have is, in the criteria for the public access waiver, I don't recall that we consider those kind of impacts, but I haven't looked at it for a while either.
No, we don't. They're fairly straightforward in terms of what you have to look at in such areas, and really deals primarily with site distance, the width of the roadway, things of this
As I
nature.
recall, they're traffic related.
Primarily traffic related, and also to make sure that the material, the road construction is sufficient so that you can actually get vehicles, both regular cars and emergency vehicles up there year-round. So you don't have a situation where the road's away or caves in 6 months down the road.
Any other questions? Steve, I think it was suggested that another condition or two, could the planning board members who suggested those conditions reiterate them so that we can add them to
There was
what we
only one,
have on
wasn't it?
paper?
No further subdivision?
No further subdivision, and wasn't there one more?
With the deed containing
Right.
prohibition. Now, I guess
No, that-
if you're going to hang on to this, you're not going to be giving anyone any deeds. So I guess what we would do is condition this upon any deeds conveying the property containing that, because he's not going to, it's not like a normal subdivision. Right.
Yeah, but won't there have to be a plan of this registered, Dan?
Yes.
So why can't we put the condition right on the plan?
One thing that's here is there are a number of conditions, and the last one that's listed under the suggested motion is that a covenant be developed that would be inserted into the deeds of all 3 lots, and that would be submitted to the town attorney and then recorded by the applicant within 90 days of the granting of this public access waiver. That's going to require the covenant and legal language to be done in review, but the registering is also going to require Mr. Rutherford to actually it's going to require him to register with 3 different lots. That's to avoid any confusion down the road when he starts, so that if you wanted to start construction of the roadway before doing that, you wouldn't get into that whole issue of is it 5,000 square feet, are there 3 lots or are there 1? So I was looking at his request, and I think as we discussed it, at least over the phone, that he wanted to do that relatively soon. So I put 90 days, it could be, pick a time, but my feeling was that it should be something that's done relatively soon. So the 3 lots are created, and all the covenants are put in, so there'll be 3 separate deeds, and everything's set and ready to go. So if Mr. Rutherford wants to do it 2 months from now, if he wants to do it 2 years from now, at least in terms of the planning board's perspective, all those loose ends are tied up relatively shortly.
I keep going back to our zoning ordinance and the regulation of wetlands alteration, which says that no wetland area as may be designated upon the official Cape Elizabeth wetlands map as adopted by the town council or as otherwise defined in this ordinance shall be filled, drained, ditched, or otherwise altered except in compliance with a planning board permit issued therefore in accordance with the provisions of this ordinance. So, I mean, if we're talking about some alteration of potential wetlands, are we coming close to a situation where perhaps we are kicking in a planning board permit for wetlands alteration?
Maybe we have to make it clear that nothing contained in a public access waiver is construed, or can be construed to be an approval of any proposals to our wetlands.
Right. That's a good suggestion. I think, would that satisfy your
I think that
concerns,
would-
Alice?
I think that would enhance the whole motion.
So a condition that would pretty much state that any alteration of wetlands that occurs on any of the 3 lots shall meet the applicable standards in place at the time of such...
Be in compliance with the section 19.3-39 regulation of wetlands.
Or we may change the number. I think Steve's point was, it ought to be clear that when he does it, he's got to comply with the wetlands ordinances applicable or inapplicable as they may be.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be condition G.
Right, well, actually, you'd want to put it in 4. F you want to keep at the end. So you want to insert, actually, you want to insert those 2 conditions after D. You want to keep E and F at the end.
Okay.
If that occurs, okay. What I'm doing is I'm kind of putting them into language, and if you want, once all the issues are
Okay.
raised, I can read the newly
Fine.
revised suggested motion and see if it fits with what the board members would like.
If the audience will bear with us for a few minutes, please. Okay, I guess Steve is ready. Could you read it to us, Steve,
Just
what
one,
you have?
if I could, Madam Chair, if I just ask the board to make sure if there are any other issues before...
Sure.
It's going to be a long reading.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other issues before he reads it? Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Okay. Be it ordered that the planning board waives the application of the subdivision ordinance's street design and construction standards to Donald Rutherford's proposed public access waiver access ways in accordance with sections 19-4-2 sub B and 16-3-5. Be it further ordered that the request of Donald Rutherford for a public access waiver to serve his existing residence and 2 new lots located at 265 Spurwink Avenue be granted in accordance with section 19-4-2 sub B of the zoning ordinance and the facts presented, subject to the following conditions. A, that the access ways be maintained and kept clear year-round. B, that a road profile and typical road section of Lot Number 1's access road in the area that the road crosses the wetlands shall be submitted by the applicant and approved by the town engineer prior to the start of any access road/driveway construction. C, that the present and future owners of Lot 1 and the lot presently owned by Donald Rutherford shall be granted the right of access to Spurwink Avenue via Lot Number 2's accessway in perpetuity. D, that the granting of this public access waiver shall apply only to residences constructed within the areas in which house and garage to be constructed, that's in quotations, as designated on the public access waiver plan approved on this date. Any residential construction outside of said areas shall need to be reviewed by the planning board according to section 19-2-4B prior to the issuance of a building permit. Okay, here are the 2 new suggested conditions. E, that there shall be no further subdivision of the lots, of the 3 lots to be served by this public access waiver approval. Okay, that's E. F, that any alteration of wetlands that occurs on any of the 3 lots shall be in compliance with the applicable wetland protection ordinance provisions in place at the time of any such construction. G, that the requirements of Section 19-4-2, sub B, and the above-mentioned conditions shall be binding upon the present and future owners of the affected lots, and H, that a covenant incorporating the above-mentioned conditions shall be inserted into the deeds of all 3 lots, semicolon, said covenants shall be submitted by the applicant for review and approval by the town attorney, and then recorded by the applicant with the Cumberland County Registry of Deeds within 90 days of the granting of this public access waiver. That's it.
Thank you, Steve.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Against? Okay, unanimously, the motion is carried. We wish you luck, and I think you have a beautiful piece of land, Mr. Rutherford.
Thank you
Enjoy
very
it.
much. Thank you.
Okay, we're running a few moments behind. Under new business, is there anyone here from the United Methodist Church concerning a youth home at 280 Ocean House Road? This is a site plan review under Section 19-2-9. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is William Hampton, and I represent the Group Home Committee. I'd like to make a few remarks before our professional planner gives you his presentation. We are proposing to build a home to house 6 children. The home will not be, perhaps not much unlike your home and my home. The major difference is that the major difference may be that it will accommodate 6 children and 1 set of house parents. Now, these children will be children, unlike ours, hopefully, that living in an environment that they must be removed from. We hope to take those children and operate the home under private funds until such a time as the parents can have counseling so that the children may be removed to an environment that's safe for them to live in. We have spent in excess of $10,000 on planning and engineering so far just to find out if we can build the home. These funds would not be typically spent or would not be spent at all if we are building nothing but a single-family home, either you or me, on a lot. We are, however, hope to build 1 home on 12 acres of land that currently accommodate the church building and the parsonage. And the subdivision and zoning ordinances have required that we spend this kind of money. Now, I'm not saying that's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying it's a statement of fact. And I'd like to establish some perspective that all we're trying to do is build 1 home. 1 home to accommodate 6 children. It's certainly certainly far removed from a large subdivision. And Jeff Perry of Land Plan Associates will make you acquainted with the plans.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond.
Thank you.
Hi, Jeff. Welcome.
I have here before you tonight 2 plans, both of which you have in front of you. By way of review, the site is located wholly within the RA zone on topography that's sloping generally from a south to northerly direction. The location of the home itself located off the existing parking lot that currently serves the church. What we are proposing to do is add an additional 2 parking spaces to the parking lot area and construct the house. The soils in the area are fine sandy loam. You have a copy of a report from the soil scientist outlining the test pits that were dug for on-site septic. By way of review, the septic field will be located, or at least the test pits in this case have been located at the northern edge of the property, where actually there'll be a force main from the youth home to that site. In terms of other utilities, there is a water line that currently traverses the site that services both the church and the parsonage that we would tie into. And electrical, we've had some preliminary discussions with CMP as to the location of a line which would, in essence, tie in with the existing utility out on Ocean House Road, come in along the parking lot, and then turn towards the building. In terms of final grades and stormwater handling, I'll draw your attention to a detail map that basically page 2 of what you have and the rendering here of that. We've attempted to minimize the area of disturbance and keep the grading to the actual site itself. As I said, it's a fairly shallow slope, only about a 5% slope, and we will minimize the area of disturbance in just the immediate building, grading back to existing grades, and the areas for the parking. Circulation, in terms of the automobile, will use the existing access off of Ocean House Road. There are 2 lanes, 2 travel lanes, if you will, within the existing parking lot area that provide the direct access to the site. Although there's no intention of subdividing the lot as part of this development, there is adequate frontage on Ocean House Road for both the existing use, which is the church and parsonage, plus the additional use, which would be the youth home. I have nothing further to add, and would like to open it up to any questions or comments you may have.
Steve, do you have any comments about
I think
this before the planning board remarks?
Sure. I think there are really 2 things that the board needs to look at, similar to subdivision. In subdivision reviews, it's really application completeness first, and then secondly, then looking at the application on its merits. And I did prepare a checklist that you should have as part of your packet. And generally speaking, the application was fairly complete. You know, saw a lot of okays and or not applicables, especially on the first page. Some things that weren't done, I think, that are relatively minor, and Bob Hunter's letter, I think, backs it up. On 8A, on the first page, talks about all existing physical features on the site within 200 feet. They don't deal with everything. They don't deal with soils. I'm not sure that's necessarily all that relevant to this this proposal. It seems to be more than adequate. In terms of the existing proposed stormwater systems, I put partial. Again, not a big issue, and I think the town engineer's letter backs that up as well. They're not proposing really to alter the existing flows all that much. The location, design of methods of solid waste storage and disposal, I think it's a pretty minor point. I think it's something that could probably be verbally dealt with by the applicant's representative. Do you want to do that now?
In terms of solid waste disposal, the church currently has, it's currently serviced, and this youth home would actually be tied in directly with that.
Lighting detail, they show where the light is. They don't give much more beyond that. Again, not expecting much there. And then the evidence of right title and interest in the property to be reviewed. That's something that wasn't submitted, and something I asked. I did call Mr. Perry, and I mentioned that to him, and I'm not sure.
We're still putting that together. I don't have it with me tonight.
Okay. It's just to make, just to clarify the fact that the church does indeed own the property in question. So in terms of completeness, really, I think the only major item that's missing then is just that, the evidence of right title and interest. So in terms of completeness, that's the checklist. There's some aspects of the information submitted that were dealt with by Mr. Hunter, but the board can deal with that next phase 2.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Any questions or comments from other members of the planning board? I have a comment. In addition to the site plan review, which you are enduring right now, will you become, apply to the state of Maine to become a licensed residential care facility, which would mean that then you would have to adhere to all of the rules and regulations in the rules and regulations for the licensing of a residential child care facility?
I believe the short answer to that is yes. This state regulations and licensing, as I understand them, cover such things as the physical plant, the clinical care of the children, and the actual personnel and staffing, all of which I believe will be addressed.
Before you came forward with this plan, I'm only asking, I'm very interested in this. This is a first. I have a letter here from the Department of Human Services dated November 9th, 1988, and I have a draft of that residential care license and what it takes to get it. So I think that the state fire marshal would be involved, you know, beside the fire chief of Cape Elizabeth. But one question I had, they had some in this draft, and unless it's been changed, they said that each bedroom space shall have at least 74 square feet floor area for a single occupant, at least a 50 square foot floor area for each occupant in a multiple sleeping area. My question would be, how large, again, are your bedrooms? It seems that you have built that you are building a very large facility. For what I have seen in the draft, you know, the minimum requirements, you've gone beyond the minimum. Bathrooms, 1 toilet for every 6 children. You have several toilets in your plan. So it seems that you've gone beyond the minimum, and I just wondered why. And
Well, first off, I should be clarified that I was not responsible for the architectural plans. However, I have been in contact with the State Human Services Department to get the most recent copy, of which I don't have it. I assume it's in the mail.
I might have an extra here.
Okay. But certainly we would make every effort to meet those if in fact we have not.
Right. Any other questions? Alice?
Madam Chairman, I think you bring up a very good point about the state's involvement in this and licensure. Are there any requirements, Mr. Planner, Mr. Butler, that stipulate that the applicant must get all state permits before coming to the town for a application?
I don't, for subdivision, the answer would be yes.
Right.
For site plan, I believe the answer is no. I'll just double check that to make sure. In terms of application completeness, I would say the answer is no. In terms of meeting the standards, I'm not even sure it's there as well in terms of having the cross-coordination between local regulations, which in this case are site plan review regulations, and then the state requirements, which deal more with the care and facilities surrounding such use. So I guess short answer is I don't think it's absolute. I don't think it's required.
It's confusing though, because in this rough draft, it is mentioned that there should be a fenced-in area for young children. You know, I mean, if we don't require it, the state is going to require it. It's very confusing.
I mean, it would seem to make sense that if the state's going to have some requirements the applicant has to meet,
Right.
that those would be kind of dealt with up front, incorporated into the site plan that you're reviewing. That would seem to make...
it is consistent with what we would require in our subdivision ordinance. So that's
Absolutely.
why I wondered
Yes.
if we're...
I'd like to address that question.
Sure, go ahead.
We've had a couple of meetings with the state people already, one in Augusta, and they were kind enough to come down here to one meeting. The licensing procedure is a very technical and long procedure. There's a little point now going through that if we're not going to build a home. And I guess we won't know whether we're going to build a home until we talk with the planning board, and in our case, prior to that, the zoning board of appeals. We could get the chicken and the egg thing forever. And I feel we have to take it one step at a time. There is no state requirement, as you pointed out, that would cause you not to give us approval. If we meet the criteria, you are welcome to approve this, and then the next step is, and it is the very next step, is to go to the state.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next step after that is the fundraising, and we'll be talking to you all individually about that.
As far as I can understand from the rules and regulations of the state, there are various kinds of licenses, too, conditional licenses, full licenses, you know, all sorts of different licenses. Yes, go ahead, Steve.
Just to respond to that previous point also, is that chicken and egg is always a question. The one issue that you need to consider is that if for some reason, when you go through the state review process, if there's some substantive change to your site plan, that would require you then to come back and go through this process again. And that's why I think, you know, the chicken and egg question may not be resolved. But that's something that...
We understand that.
Okay.
We're very comfortable that the plans that are presented to you will be adequate to meet the need and the licensing rules and regulations.
I guess I'd like to follow up on that, because the chicken and egg thing does result in additional imposition on a lot of people if it isn't handled right. I haven't seen what you're talking about, Mayor. I don't know if anybody has no reason why I should have seen it, but apparently there's the possibility of some state requirements.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't have any idea what those are, if they're different parking, lighting, fencing, all the kinds of things that we get into. Then the approval that you have from us wouldn't be worth very much if you're going to have to make any changes. That's just a different way of saying the same thing Steve is saying. But I guess more substantively, are there things suggested in there that we as good planners might want anyway for this particular proposal? It's a house, but it's not a single-family house, which is obviously why you're here before us. It has some attributes of a different animal, of a facility where you're going to provide some kind of care and shelter for a range of children, which makes it different than a single-family house. And if the letter suggests some things that we should consider, we ought to consider now, maybe kill two birds with one stone. If they're totally related to the care element, then I don't think it's any of our business. If they're sort of planning-related things that somebody with some experience in these kinds of facilities thinks are good to have built into a project, then we should pay some attention to them.
Well, I'd like to respond to that, if I may.
Sure.
The particular plan that you have in front of you was not something that we just threw lines up in the air and they came down on the paper in the form that you see them. The committee, which is represented here tonight, has made a great deal of study visiting homes of a similar nature within Maine and outside of Maine. We picked the best of facilities. The plan that you see, there is none any better than that. There are no standards any higher than the one you have in front of you. Some of you may have read last winter that the state indicated that there were 150 children on the street. The reason they are on the street is because the homes that they had been removed from and the homes that they had been placed into were worse than the homes that they were taken out of. There's a tremendous need for this. Not only are they going to get loving care in this home, but they're going to have a very, you mentioned that the sizes of the rooms and the amount of toilets.
It's just
You know,
incredible.
we don't want them to come to, there's little reason for children to have to go to outhouses or sleep 6 to a room. We're trying to do something about this, and we solicit your support in a speedy approval so we can get started with the project.
Thank you.
I've got one other...
Go ahead,
too.
Dan.
No one is saying that isn't a good idea, but as a planning board, we've got to be objective rather than subjective. I think you people have done a wonderful thing, and it's obvious that this kind of facility is needed. The question really relates to whether or not we're going to have to see it a second time because of something the state does. And, you know, if the rest of the planning board is willing to, based on any looks that they have had at that letter, conclude that it's highly unlikely that the state, in the process of proving it, would require something that, you know, we don't have to take any farther. But we do have an obligation to be objective about this. I guess the second question I have is, and it's more for Steve. I assume that there has been some kind of public notice to all of the abutters.
Yes.
It looks like, from where it sits and my general knowledge of that area, that it's going to be very well buffered. If you sat through the last discussion, you saw that we gave the same, at least the same indication to single-family homes, so it's nothing to do with your project. But I guess maybe you ought to answer the question now that Steve has told me about the public notice. Is this something that needs any buffering? It looks like it sits in the woods in a way that wouldn't be seen by anybody.
Well, you made 2 points. Thank you for the fact that it's a good idea, the comment that it's a good idea. It won't be a good idea till the plan is done and children are in it, getting them out of an area that's unfit for any child to live in. As far as public notice is concerned, there have been 2. I believe that there was public notice sent on this particular application, and prior to our visit with you, we went through the Zoning Board of Appeals. Now, there was opposition at one of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we were thinking of putting the home in a location other than the one that we currently show. We were thinking of having it in this area, and there was objection by some of the residents, or I guess 2 residents objected to that.
Where would that be?
This is off Shore Road. There's a right-of-way in here to the parsonage, and we were going to put it right in here. And because there was objections, we changed the location to here, and as you can easily see, it's well buffered.
So it's basically right behind the parking lot.
That's exactly right. This is the end of the existing parking lot right now. And the whole area is heavily wooded. What you see here indicates that, in fact, there'll have to be some clearing to get the home in.
What's the distance between the home and the lot line?
Well, that's an appropriate question. We got a schematic.
Well, it's on the back side, there's a dimension.
I'm going to sit down while I still got my skin and give it back to...
Thank you. Question asked, the distance between the home and the lot line is about 90 feet.
Question.
Sure, go ahead,
Madam
Ivan.
Chairman. Has there been any correspondence from abutters on this project?
Not that I'm aware of, no. Madam Chairman, if I may point out one
Sure.
more item, too. I asked the applicant's consultant to show, and it's shown on this schematic, it's not shown on the sheets you have before you, what the what the parking lot design was, so we would know exactly how cars would be moving in and out from the proposed youth home to Route 77, and so they have done that. It shows the flow, and that is representative of what's there. So that issue, if it was raised in your minds, isn't an issue any longer.
Steve, I'd like to ask a question. According to the zoning board minutes, was it indeed a condition of approval that there would be no more than 6 children housed here? Or did I misinterpret that?
Nope. No more than 6 children, and be used, that condition was that, it was a conditional approval, and one of the conditions was that the building will be used only as a group home for 6 children operated by the United Methodist Church of Cape Elizabeth.
Thank you. So that would be in perpetuity, and if the members of the church wanted to change that, they would have to go, where would they have to go? Back to the zoning board to,
Back to the zoning board at this point.
if they wanted to admit more children?
Right. Unless you wanted to put a similar condition. That the condition's there once, unless the zoning board changes it, that would remain.
Right.
Your approval, I think, would be for one youth home. You may want to list exactly how many children also. So again, if in the future there's some discussion about increasing number of children, but again, that it's clearly defined. I'm not sure that that's ever going to happen in terms
Right.
of this specific residence itself, but.
No, but when you're talking about children, it's hard to set a number because oftentimes there are families involved, and you don't want to split up a family. And if it means having 7 children rather than 6 children, I mean, it would seem far more humane to me to accept the family, you know? That's my only question.
I'm not sure that we can do much about that.
No.
The decision of the...
That's
No.
really not under our purview.
No, it
anyway.
isn't.
I did want to ask if the applicant if there were any other objections voiced other than the citing of the home at the zoning board, and whether you were able to accommodate or meet those
They were concerned
objections.
about the traffic because when we proposed the other location, the vehicle that the home will use was going to exit onto Shore Road. With this change, of course, it's going to exit and enter on Route 77.
And those were the only objections, the
That's
citing
all I
and the
recall.
traffic.
Any other questions, Ivan?
Can we move the question, or?
I think Steve might give us some additional help on this before we move. Is there anything that perhaps we could add to this, Steve?
I think there's 2 issues. One, on the suggested motions, there isn't one dealing with application completeness. And I have one that I could read that's very similar to all the others that could be done. The one issue that's outstanding, or the one item that's really outstanding in a major way, is the right title and interest. And if the board wanted to, I suppose it could make that a condition of the site plan approval, that be submitted. I assume it's going to be relatively perfunctory and not a big item. If the board feels that way, then perhaps you could find the application to be complete, except for that item, but incorporate that into the approval. If that's the case, then I could read a suggested motion regarding completeness.
Would you please?
Be it ordered that the application of the United Methodist Church for site plan approval to construct one youth home to be located at 280 Ocean House Road is deemed to be complete in accordance with Section 19-2-9 of the zoning ordinance and the facts presented.
You're not going to make that contingent upon the right title?
What I thought was that in terms of completeness, that I would put that item under the actual, if you were thinking of giving site plan approval tonight, that would be a site plan approval condition. Otherwise, it's difficult to give a conditional completeness finding. It depends upon how strict you want to be. Strictly speaking, they don't have the right title and interest, and therefore, you could stop right there and cut it off. If you want to be a little more lenient, given the fact right title interest in this case is probably not a big issue.
I wouldn't want to be tough with a church.
It's up to the board. But my thought was to make it cleaner, it might make sense to put that, the submission of that under the site plan approval.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
I don't know how we missed that one, and I apologize for that, but I just asked the minister where our deed was, and he says it's in the safe deposit box. We could have that in your hands tomorrow morning.
That'd be great. Okay.
Sounds good, Mr. Hammond.
I would second the motion that was made.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? I guess the motion is carried unanimously.
So that's completeness. Now,
Okay, that's completeness. Now we have the
What-
rest to consider.
You have a suggested motion for site plan approval. Two conditions. One, I've just talked about, right title and interest. Another one, if it's an issue that you're concerned about, might deal or reinforce the fact that if any change was to be required by the Department of Human Services, that would necessitate re-review by the planning board. If that's an issue, that's another condition that I've worked out, if it's an issue. So I throw those two open. I can read them if, do you think both of those are appropriate?
Yes, would you please, Steve?
Okay. Be it ordered that the planning board finds that the proposal of the United Methodist Church to construct one youth home to be located at 280 Ocean House Road meets the standards contained in subsection 19-2-9C of the zoning ordinance. Be it therefore ordered that the request of the United Methodist Church for site plan approval to construct one youth home, to be located at 280 Ocean House Road be granted in accordance with section 19-2-9 of the zoning ordinance and the facts presented, subject to the following conditions. A, that any change required by the Maine Department of Human Services to the applicant's site plan shall require a new site plan review by the planning board. And B, that written evidence of the applicant's right title and interest shall be submitted for review and approval by the town planner within 30 days of the approval date. That's it. Sounds like 1 or 2 days will definitely fall within the 30 days.
Mr. Hammond, did you have a comment?
Yes. If the state does come up with something that requires a change, but that change is minor and not contrary to your ordinances, would that be important to you?
Steve?
The thing I'm thinking of is if you just added 2 words in there, any change is not contrary to your ordinance.
I think there would have to be changes that affected what we had approved.
Yeah.
If it didn't affect it, you don't care.
Yeah, if they tell us we got to do some little thing, another light or something like that,
Right.
Yeah.
I can't imagine you'd care.
No.
Would the word substantive be enough for the board, or would you want to put something more specific?
I think it would be something that altered the project as approved by us. There's a certain, obviously, in approving this, we haven't approved every outside light fixture, and it seems to me that if they change anything that we've approved, that's when we have to see it. If it's something that we haven't approved, then I don't see that affects us. Am I going too far?
No? I'm just trying to think how that would be worded.
I think it would be any action by the state which would change the project as approved by us. I think we're talking about the project on the face of the earth and the way it looks on the design plans, that sort of stuff. I think if it changes the plans, even if it's slight,
Yeah.
it has to be reapproved by us. So I guess that's really the key, is it going to affect the plans?
Okay.
Plans submitted, I guess.
Okay, let's see how this would read. Okay, if that first condition would read something as follows, let's write, that any action by the Maine Department of Human Services that substantially change the design, substantively change the design or layout of the site plans as approved by the planning board shall then require a new site plan review by the planning board.
therefore maybe need to also be approved by the planning board. I'm not sure. if
Okay, need
requiring
us.
a site plan review, but I think might have to come in to amend
Okay.
the site plan.
Okay, let me, okay, if you can bear with me, I'll try and
I just say shall require review and approval of the planning board.
require.
We've had a very busy night of writing.
That's right.
Thank you for bearing with us.
Okay, so that any action by the Maine Department of Human Services that substantively change the design or layout of the site plan is approved by the planning board shall require a new review and approval by the planning board. Not overly elegant, but Brian says what we want to say. Okay?
Implicit in that is if there's some simple way to get that approval, you can get it. If it means a full site review, then you have to do that. We're just not specifying what you have to do.
And then the second condition was satisfactory dealing with right title and interest within 30 days?
Yep.
Okay, as read.
Right.
So
Okay.
moved?
So moved. Ivan, thank you. Is
Second.
there a second? Steve?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, enjoy it.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful thing for Cape Elizabeth. Hello. We're running a half hour late this evening. Next on the agenda is Bill Lee, a residential driveway to be located within 100 feet of a wetland, Dyer Pond Road, lot number 7. Review of a condition of approval for the Dyer Pond Road subdivision.
Marion, I noticed in the materials some involvement of Stonegate, and I see Mr. Stonegate in the audience. I would have a conflict if, in fact, there's an interest. Stonegate Corporation has an interest in this. If you're just here for, Bob, if you're just here for your own purposes to watch what happens, and it's all Mr. Lee's problem if he succeeds or fails, then I don't have a problem. If your company or you have an interest in it, then I do.
Bob, could you step up to the microphone, please? We know you that...
My name is Bob Taylor, and I'm the managing general partner of Stonegate Associates. Lot number 7 is currently under contract for sale to Mr. Lee from Stonegate Associates. It is a condition of that contract for sale that he receive a building permit for his home.
You have enough people who help me, don't you?
I think we do.
I think I'll participate in this one.
Okay. Thank you,
Do you
Dan.
want me to get anything for you?
No, thank you. Okay, go on, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Richard Twitchell. I'm a landscape architect with Portland Design Team.
Well, welcome to the Cape Elizabeth Planning Board.
Glad to be here.
It's Richard
Twitchell.
Twitchell. Thank you.
And we're here tonight because we are proposing a driveway within 100 feet of a mapped wetland that was mapped as part of the subdivision by Normando Associates, who did the wetland study at the time. I've sent to you copies of a report that have excerpts from the Normando study and a general overview of the project. And I'll go over a few things, and I'll keep it short because of the time frame that we're
Well,
under
thank you,
tonight.
but you deserve your time, so take what you need.
This property is an 8.2-acre site. It's Lot 7 of the Dyer Pond subdivision. And we do have the small pond located right here, and this is only part of the pond. The pond does extend down and off of this property onto the adjacent property as well. The area that we're looking at developing basically falls within the 100-foot setback that the town of Cape Elizabeth has in place. It does not fall within the 50-foot setback that was part of the subdivision approval process. The landforms on the site make it such that we have really two options on where to enter into the site to access the back parcel, which is back in this area, to site the house. And the location that we've chosen off of Dyer Pond Road right here was done so mainly because of the fact that we did not want to have a big wide open gash that went straight through and up this hill, which would have occurred had we located the entrance in this location, and we would have come right straight through here. This location allows us to have the driveway traverse the slope parallel with the existing topography, stay above some of the little bedrock outcrops and ridges, use those as part of the road base, and in separating the road or the driveway from the pond area. Additionally, we are proposing to cross the low-lying area in here with a bridge rather than trying to put a culvert in or something of that nature. So we're trying to reduce the impact on the area even further. As you can see, if we had come in at a different location, because of the topographic nature in this area, we would be here tonight regardless of where we were coming in. Because of the topography on the site, we have to be here.
Right.
And we are proposing that during the construction of the project, a lot of intensive effort be put into keeping as much of the land intact as possible. And that would include things such as the bedrock outcrop that occurs in this little ridge line. We may, instead of the slope that you see drawn on this, if possible, we may just have a sheer face of rock to alleviate having to blast back even further and do further damage to the land. We are trying to minimize that as much as possible. The drainage itself, we're proposing to have the driveway slope this direction into a small swale, very shallow, that runs along this side of the driveway. This is an existing low area that has deep permeable soils. We're anticipating that any runoff would go into that area and basically just permeate through into the groundwater table. And then finally it would end up in this pond. By going into the soil and then coming out here, that would eliminate pollutants from the water before it got to that pond, because the action of the soils leach out phosphates as a natural process. Additionally, the drainage, should it get high enough to overflow, we're proposing a small ditch that would come down this way, and then this area in here is where the water would go, and it's a very flat area that gets over to about this point before it starts tipping down, going over the hill. And this area also is very permeable, and if you looked out there at the erosion lines that are within that soil area, there are none. It's just a wide area. It's kind of it's a woods road is what it is, and it just happens to be the drainage way. But there are no channelization in that area to show that there's any erosion potential because of this permeability of the soils. You know, that I'll just open it up for questions, comments.
Well, I'll start with one. How wide is the 60-foot bridge, and would it accommodate emergency vehicles like large fire trucks?
Yes, the bridge, we haven't had a structural engineer design the bridge for us yet.
Mm-hmm.
We are looking at concrete abutments, steel frame construction with wood everywhere else, so that the only thing you'll see is wood, hopefully. The width of it would be a minimum of 8 feet, and we may go up to 12. We've been looking at some bridges that are similar to this in other areas. If you go up to Falmouth Foreside on Route 88, there are a few of the estates along there that have bridges that cross a swale line, and we've been looking at those. Those are typically in the 12 to 16 foot range as far as width, and that's pretty much what we'd be looking at.
Thank you. Your plan certainly exudes a definite sensitivity to the land and the wetlands. And
Thank you.
I was very impressed.
One other point I would like to bring up, and that is the landscape itself. if you recall the Normando study and the attachments that were made, several of the plant materials that we put into the landscape, proposed landscape, are indigenous species to the site. They are found around the pond itself, and those would include iris, chokeberry, winterberry, birch, and royal fern, just to name a few of the existing plant materials out there.
Is any of that land in the Resource Protection District?
Not according to the mappings that I have.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Alice?
Just a comment, I think it's a very responsible treatment of the landscape there. And I do have a question, I guess, about, you mentioned you might have to have a cliff on one, what would that do to the road if you had a cliff?
It would do nothing. It would just mean that we would not have to widen the existing land.
I'm thinking about drainage and whether that would...
We would still widen it enough to accommodate the drainage way. But if possible, beyond that drainage way, we would make it a sheer face rather than having to taper it back. We would only do that also if the soils above that rock were stable. If there are loose soils above that rock, we would taper it back.
How long will the driveway be, total length?
Total length? That's a good question at this point. If I were making a top-of-the-head estimate, I'd say we're looking at 800 to 900 feet. We are going back to a little ridge area that's about another this far again back to where the house would be built.
Any other questions or comments? Would the planning board like to see this property? Would the planning board care to bring the Conservation Commission into our deliberations?
I think we've had a very comprehensive report and proposal on this. I personally feel comfortable with it.
Okay, Ivan?
I feel the same way. It seems like this is something that we, in approving the overall subdivision, we've gone over.
Yep.
And this seems like a very responsible way to access this lot, so I couldn't see a reason for another site visit.
Right. Steve, how do you feel about it?
Certainly it's very detailed.
Very.
I don't know, maybe you can correct me if it's our purview to, as far as the access for emergency vehicles, 8 feet certainly isn't wide enough, but maybe that's not even for us to say.
If I were guessing at this point, I would say the minimum would be 12. And I think that probably 16 across there would even be more likely.
As far as visiting the site, we have very detailed plans to go by.
One request I would make, and Steve, maybe you can answer this question, has the police and fire department seen this plan?
They've seen the plan, but they didn't really comment on it. I mean, they reviewed it along with everything else, but I think that the primary review was based on the environmental side, so my recollection is that they really didn't spend much time on it, didn't really comment on it. Because they felt that, well, in terms of wetlands alteration, they really didn't have much to say about that. So.
But in terms of access and width of the bridge and things like that, could we get their comments on it?
We could, yeah. We haven't received them yet, but we could.
Well, I certainly agree with all of you and the comments you've made. Just one question, though, about the process. This access way would accesses Dyer Pond Road, which had some conditions of approval. And I wonder if the original conditions of approval were met on the Dyer Pond Road itself. And that had to do with 3 culverts. It was I don't know if the rest of you remember that, it was a key element in the drainage situation there between the stream and the pond. And, I don't know from a process point of view if it's our purview, but I think we should determine whether all of the conditions of approval have been met on the main road before we get into a permit. Bob, maybe you could answer whether the culverts are in. It's hard to see them.
With regard to the culverts that are concerned,
Right.
those are located on lots 8 and 1 and are not located on lot 7, so they would have no direct impact on the location of the access way to lot 7. In terms of, are they installed yet? They are not.
Oh, okay.
However, they are under bond for completion, and it is the normal practice of the town to issue permits for activities on individual lots if the subdivision improvements are under bond for completion.
Any other questions? Now, do I hear a motion?
Can we make a motion on completeness on this one?
No. I mean, you could, but it seems to be, since this is really condition where my idea was we're using the criteria of the wetlands alteration, but, if there's more information that you want, feel free to ask for it, but the two-step or three-step process, I didn't think was all that necessary. I mean, I think they've hit on all the major points, but.
So this would be basically an acceptance of the plan, or what would we be conditioning it?
I think it would be that, I have something that's written up that we could try out, that the proposed driveway generally meets the wetlands alteration criteria, and therefore meets, the board's opinion meets the condition of approval that was placed on any wetlands alterations within the Dyer Pond Road subdivision.
Okay.
You want me to-
Sounds good.
And do you think,
And I would like to just subject that to the approval of the fire chief and
Yeah.
the
Okay.
town engineer, as far as the safety factor of the
Right.
reviewing it and meeting.
May I comment on this public safety issue?
sure.
The specific condition is really very direct in its language, and it says that alterations within 100 feet of wetlands shall meet the then current Cape Elizabeth standards for wetlands alteration. The town does not see fit on other single-family lots to regulate the alignment or width of driveways, and it seems inappropriate